All right. Good morning, everybody. First of all, my apologies for starting a little later. Ran over from the keynote, and I didn't realize that folks were going to be here already. And while we sort out our technical difficulties, okay, maybe this is going to sound nervous. And the saga continues. We give it a second and if need be, if I can get my clicker to work, then I can stand there, and I think I have a loud enough voice for everybody to hear me. But I'm not able to get the clicker to work just yet. I'll give it a second, and all right, I got a thumbs up this time, so hopefully you're not going to hear that noise again. A very warm welcome again on behalf of Couchbase to all of you in the room. I'm very excited to be here to give you a preview of what's coming in our upcoming release, which is Couchbase Mobile 2.0. By show of hands, how many of us are using Couchbase today? Mobile. Most of us are using Couchbase Mobile. All right, just for my own benefit, which platforms? How many are using iOS? Cool. And how many are using Android? Is there anybody using .NET? Okay. Anybody doing hybrid platform development with Cordova or? All right. No phone gap or anything. Cool. Thank you. And we still are running into difficulties with the mic. Let's give it a second. Hopefully I get the thumbs up again. All right, let me dive right in, and I'm going to try and get us back on track. I know I'm like maybe 15 minutes behind, but I think we should be able to go through this and then try and compress the Q&A if need be to get the session done around time. So I'm going to start with a safe harbor statement, which our legal team insists that I put in there, which is the fact that some of these dates or some of the features that I'm going to share with you are subject to change, and it's not a commitment that we'd be having all of these in the time frame or in the release numbers that I mentioned over here. But what I'd like to do over the next few slides is go over what's coming in Couchbase Lite 2.0, talk about what's been released in Sync Gateway 1.5, and then what's coming in 2.0, and in the end, just leave it for question and answers. So, Couchbase Lite 2.0. For those of you who've been using this on multiple platforms, so far we've had Couchbase Lite implemented as a separate piece of code on each of these platforms. For example, the implementation on .NET is different from the implementation on iOS, and is different from the implementation on Android. And the result of all of that is that many times we've had customers find similar issues on all three platforms, and I think we run into this whole challenge with having to fix the same issue across three different set of code bases. So with Couchbase 2.0, one of the big changes that we're doing is we're essentially taking all the learning from the last 5 years or so that we've been in the market, and we've come up with a new implementation of the database that's written in C++. That's what you see at the very bottom over there, which is called Lite Core. That essentially encapsulates all of the functionality of Couchbase Lite in the C++ layer. So you have support for CRUD operations, you have events, models are coming, we have query, we have full text search, replication and security built in at the core C++ layer. On top of that, we have platform-specific bindings, which essentially provide the same functionality for the programming language of choice, whatever you're actually using for building your application. So we have native API bindings for Cocoa, for Java, and for .NET. In addition to that, we also have support for Apache Cordova and PhoneGap, which is So on top of the core C++ layer, which is called Lite core, we also have native API bindings for Cocoa, for Java, and .NET, which means that all the functionality that is available in Lite core is available in your programming language of choice as well. The key difference to note here is that the native API bindings that are on top, that are represented in maroonish red, are all public-facing APIs, and we take.
For live stream, I need you there or over. Thank you.
All right. For all of these APIs that are available at the native binding, we have the public APIs available as documentations, and that is something that wouldn't change dramatically over time. And even when we make those changes for this release, which is a 2.0 train, these changes would be backward compatible. But the Lite core layer, which is the C++ layer, that is something that we continue to optimize over time. And under the hood, some of the implementation details over there might change, but that wouldn't impact how the layer on top would be exposed. The key advantage for us that we've seen in all of our testing so far is that the new C++ API layer, along with the bindings in the native language, is around 6 times faster than the current implementation of Couchbase Lite, which is the 1.x version. What this also does is play very nicely into one of the things that I'm very passionate about, which is the IoT space. With a C++ binding, we're the only embedded database out there that can really give you the ability to store content offline when you're looking at low fidelity devices, or you're looking at something where you want to program in a C or a C++ environment, as opposed to using Java, Android, and .NET. So that is something that we are very closely considering right now. We might even be starting a community project to create a more public C++ binding as well. Just from an interest perspective, would there be any interest in this room on a direct C++ binding to Couchbase Lite as well? All right, I see 1 and I see 2. Cool. We should definitely chat offline about what your interest is and what sort of use cases you have out there. But I think the most interesting part for me is that this really sets up Couchbase Lite for the IoT space. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we're seeing customers deploy Couchbase Lite in an IoT environment today. With that, let me move on to the next slide. If you've dealt with the 1.0 API, let me tell you that we are actually making significant strides in making that API a lot more simpler in 2.0. In fact, I think one of the key tenets or tests for me was I've gone to the training team that within Couchbase that develops our training curriculum, and I asked them to, we basically provided them an early access to the builds of 2.0, and I just asked them to give us very candid, brutal feedback on what we think was a much simpler API with 2.0. And I think the response was that there is a very, very big difference in the learning curve between 1.x and 2.0. So for those of you who are familiar with 1.x, you'll start to see the API evolve, and I think all the goodness and the feedback that we've gotten over the last 5 years is coming into the 2.0 API. If you've heard any of our talks before, we've actually been in a fairly long beta program with 2.0 today. And the reason for that long beta program is that we've had a bunch of developer previews available on our website, and we've been engaging very closely with the Couchbase Lite community and getting feedback on the 2.0 API. And we've heard from maybe a few folks in the room as well on how the 2.0 API is a lot simpler than the 1.x API. So here's a very simple example of CRUD operations on 2.0. I'm just creating a new document and setting the name of a person and an age and putting a bunch of things over there. I think an interesting thing over there is that even in that CRUD operation, I'm also putting in a blob image, which is available here on the top left. And that, I'm going to do a comparison of how that changes between 1.x and 2.x. So let me just go back and say that, show you both of those working close together. On the left-hand side is the code from a code snippet from 1.x, where you have to use the native map library that is available on your platform. In this case, I'm using an example from Java, the language that I'm most comfortable with, and have to create a new hash map and put all those properties in there. As you can see, that code is fairly longer than what you see on the right-hand side. And for creating an attachment over there and adding that attachment in there, I think there's a bunch of work that you need to do in 1.x today and is abstracted in 2.0. The same is true for update as well. If I look at update between 1.x and 2.0, you'd see that it's a lot simpler. I don't have to create one more revision of the document. I can just go ahead and simply put in the new values that I'd like in a particular document and go ahead and save that directly to the database. So let me then switch gears and talk about one of the big things that is coming in 2.0, which is support for queries. So for those of you who've been using Couchbase Server, we have SQL for JSON, which is called NCL, or the query language for accessing JSON documents that are stored in the Couchbase Server. And with the 2.0 release, that capability is coming to mobile as well. One of the key drivers for this was us listening to feedback from some of our largest customers, where the way they've been using queries with the 1.x product is that they have teams of developers working together in two aspects of the same application. One developer building MapReduce views that then translate into some sort of queries. And based on those view queries, there's another developer that is actually going ahead and building business logic. And I think that was, with the capability coming in 2.0, which is support for NCL in or rather support for queries in a NCL-like syntax, or in a syntax that makes a lot of sense for the language that you're using. And I'm showing examples here for Java and for Objective-C. The need for many of those customers have told us that they don't need two developers anymore, where one developer can actually do the job that two developers were doing with 2.x. So it is really helping reduce the amount of time that they're using or taking for the development of their applications out there. So here I have an example of what a simple SQL select statement would look like, where I'm selecting all the values that exist in the accounts table for owner John, and I'm ordering by a certain value. And you can see the same thing being applied on the Java query below, where I open up a database connection to the local embedded database, and then I apply my where clause over there, supply the expression, and this is a syntax that has been inspired also by looking at what are the other technologies out there that are providing similar capabilities. So we looked at Juke, which is a very popular way for representing SQL in Java, and the syntax out here is very similar to the syntax available over there. And last but not the least, for those of you who are avid Objective-C developers, this is what it looks like on Objective-C. It's a little bit more verbose than it is in Java, but it gives you the capabilities of being able to query your data directly without having to worry about learning MapReduce or any of the other complicated technologies for building equivalent functionality today. One of the other things, that's coming out here is, I think this. Okay, probably before I go into the next thing out here is, all right, so we just covered queries. So what I'd like to point out is one of the other things that's coming in 2.0 also is, and this is something that is not yet committed, is a very similar syntax for the ability to run full text search. So as you know, today we released full text search on the Couchbase server side, and the objective is to have the same capability come on Couchbase Mobile as well. So that is something that's in the works now that the capability is released on the server. We're going to be having the same ability coming on Couchbase Mobile as well. And the syntax of a full text search query is going to be very similar to the syntax of a regular query that you see out here. So from a syntactical perspective, if you learn how to query the database using this scheme right here, you can use both regular queries for getting data from specific fields, or use full text search for searching text documents like you would and get data from different fields. One of the other things that we've done in 2.0 is we've completely reimagined how we've been dealing with conflicts. I know there's a bunch of developers over here, so how many of you have had to deal with conflicts in 1.x today? All right, I see 2 hands going up. So for those of us who've not had to deal with conflicts, I think just to recap what we do in 1.x is that we allow multiple disconnected clients to work on the same document if they will, and they may be in a state where both Sachin and somebody else were working on the same record at the same time and created a conflict in the system. The system would behave or rather the database would behave in a deterministic fashion, which means that when both of those clients come back online, you're able to see the same document appear for all parties that are interested in that document. But there is underneath the hood a conflict that's existing in the system that needs to be handled out of band. Couchbase Mobile gives you the flexibility of handling that conflict either on the Couchbase Lite side, which is your client, or on the server by using the Sync Gateway REST APIs. Now, the big difference in 2.0 is that we're moving away from this out-of-band handling of conflicts, and moving to a model where anytime there is a conflict in the system, then we're making it incumbent upon the application to handle the conflict at that time. So we will have a bunch of default conflict resolvers that are shipped along with the product, and we'd give you the ability to implement specific interfaces if you'd like to tailor that conflict management or conflict resolution for your specific needs. So one other key feature that I'd like to point out that is coming in 2.0, and again, this comes with a star because I'm not sure if this is going to make it in 2.0 or going to make it in 2.1, but it's definitely a feature that I'd like to call out, is the fact that we're introducing the ability to to optimize how we send traffic on the network. Today, anytime a document is changed, irrespective of how much of a change was there in the document, the whole document is synchronized from the client back to the server. Now, delta synchronization, as the term specifies, is essentially being able to compute the differences between 2 versions of the document and being able to send that difference over the network. So you're optimizing for network traffic and giving up a little bit on the CPU computation on both the client side as well as the server side. Interestingly, I think we've run a few tests, and one of the tests that we ran was where we had one unencompressed document from Amazon's product catalog, which was around 2K in size. Used standard compression on that, and then that came down to around 260 bytes. And then using delta compression, we were able to see that the amount of data that was being transferred was reduced further down to around 72 bytes, which was around 4% of the total overall size of the document. The way to think about this is that when the document is created for the first time, the whole document is transmitted from one party to the other. But when a second, third, and fourth revision of the document are created, it's not the whole document that is sent across, it's only the difference between the versions of the documents that is sent across. And again, this is something that is in the works. As you can imagine, this is a fairly involved problem, and requires a bunch of work, but I think we're getting consistent feedback from our customers that there is a lot of value in providing this functionality today, especially when you're looking at transmitting large objects that change infrequently or certain attributes of that object change. The challenge with 1.x today is that you'd have to go and change your data model to make sure that whatever is changing is abstracted as a separate object model and separate object or JSON, and then whatever is not changing too frequently and is a large bulky attachment, if you will, would be modeled separately. But with delta synchronization, you'd be essentially able to get in the ability to abstract all of that. So even if your data model doesn't change, we'll make sure that you can optimize your data for network traffic. With that, yes. So I think there are certain algorithms that are available. This is not a new problem. This has been solved. The simplest way for me to explain is that once you have the document transmitted from one side to the other, you have some sort of a reference table that is created. And then every time a new version of the document is sent, I think you essentially use that reference table to compute the delta. And then the delta is sent and the reference table is available anyways on both sides. So using that, and this is a very simple way of describing it. I think there's folks in the room, actually not in the room right now, who are architects who would be happy to have a deeper conversation with you about this. But if you go look for zlib delta compression, Z-delta compression, that is the algorithm that we used under the hoods for something like this. Yep. All right, so let me go ahead and chat about, so before I go into Sync Gateway 2.0, I'd like to, we released Sync Gateway 1.5, which is our new version for Couchbase Sync Gateway. And what that lets you do is essentially interoperate with any Couchbase Server SDK that is writing to a bucket that Sync Gateway is writing to. But for a quick preview of what's coming in 2.0, so the big focus, again, from a client perspective, there is work that needs to be done on Delta synchronization. Even on the Sync Gateway side to support Delta synchronization, there's work to be done. So we're looking at getting that in there. One of the other key things that we're looking at is as we introduce automated conflicts. So we want the ability to introduce a no conflict mode in Sync Gateway. One of the big challenges in having conflicts within the Couchbase Mobile ecosystem is that we have this notion of a revision tree where the different divisions of a document are tracked in a tree, and that has implications in terms of storage. As you're looking at simple workloads where the amount of storage is really, really important, and especially when you're looking at high volumes of data being used, there, for such scenarios, we're looking at a conflict-free mode where you're not able to get into a revision tree depth of more than one. And then last but not the least, we've had a lot of customers come and tell us that they'd like to have the ability to customize the cookie name that is being used for replication of data between Couchbase Lite and Sync Gateway. And the reason for that is they're building applications where they have multiple instances of Couchbase Lite embedded. So there might be one Couchbase Lite instance that is for maybe the user profile, and there's another Couchbase Lite instance within the same application that is for, let's say, some other document data. So they'd like the ability to synchronize both of those databases independent of each other, and that's where multiple cookies, the ability to define which cookie to use when would be very beneficial from an overall synchronization perspective. Again, just directionally correct statements, but may not make it to 2.0. We are essentially looking at improving the manageability of Sync Gateway. I think some of the things that we're thinking about is what are the various nodes in a Sync Gateway cluster? What's the configuration of all of those nodes? Basic statistics around what's available in Sync Gateway cluster and all of that should be available in the management console. One of the ideas that we've been thinking about is declarative security. So we have this fine-grained security control available in Sync Gateway today. And the way to implement that is by going ahead and writing your own sync functions. So we're looking at abstracting that out and seeing if we can make that more declarative and have, I wouldn't say a nice looking UI, but I'd say a fairly efficient UI that's effective in building that security model. And last but not the least, when you're deployed in production, you need to get information about what's happening in your Sync Gateway cluster. The ability to go to a web page and just have all of those logs or all the information captured and readily available is a big one for us. So that's all on the manageability bucket. And then on the serviceability side, a lot of our customers have been telling us that once they see any changes on the Couchbase Server cluster, if there is a rebalancing or new nodes are being added, in some cases, depending on how the application is written, the building of the sync gateway views is taking a long time. So we're looking at using some of the other technologies and not being wedded to views, and replacing views with global secondary indexes and index replicas to get around that problem of view rebalancing or view computation during server rebalancing. Again, from a diagnostics perspective and I think logging perspective, we want to make sure that sync gateway becomes more serviceable, and we introduce the right amount of diagnostics and if you will, and logs to make sure that once you have sync gateway deployed in production, if something goes wrong or if something is not behaving the way it should, you're able to troubleshoot and debug those issues without much effort. So that concludes a quick preview of what's coming in Couchbase Mobile 2.0. Let me see if there's any questions in the room. I'm sorry? Yes, so right now 2.0 originally was slated to be released by the end of this year, but we pushed the release out. Again, like I said, we've seen a lot of community engagement on the API, so it's going to be Q1 of next year. So we're still working through the exact date in Q1, but I'd say that it'll be late Q1 next year. Yes, so that's one of the things that we're considering. Like I said, I think we basically all of your clients at the same time. So everybody's going to change those on whenever they're ready to do that. So you might have a mixed mode where you have 1.x clients and 2.0 clients out there. So from a sync gateway perspective, it's able to support both 1.x and 2.x clients. So if you're thinking about it from a distribution perspective, as your app upgrades, and there's a subset of the people who've upgraded their app, they would not see any difference in behavior. Sync Gateway has the ability to work with both 1.x clients as well as 2.x clients. But from an API perspective, 2.0 is a breaking API change. So the 1.x APIs do not work on a 2.0 or a 2.x Couchbase Lite instance, but that's only on Couchbase Lite. And from the initial conversations that we've had with developers and customers, it's just a matter of a few weeks to port code over from 1.x to 2.x on the Couchbase Lite side. Does that answer your question? Yes. All right.
So I have a related question. With so many updates that is happening on the mobile OS level, how do you keep up with the compatibility and making sure that it works on all the updated mobile OS systems?
So we have an extensive QE process, and every time there is a new update coming in, we make sure that we go back and check the Couchbase Lite instance on those. And if there's any issue, believe it, our community is fairly vibrant. I think we hear about it before any of the people who are affected by it would hear about it. And I think, again, whether you're going to our forums or you're engaging with us on our Google groups page, that community would know even before the actual OS version comes out. So I think I feel pretty confident saying that even if we didn't have or we don't like go out of our way to figure this out, our community will keep us honest on making sure we're compatible with all changes.
And if any patches are required, you make the patch available.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So I think the only instance I know of was where there was a security patch that was required, a vulnerability that was found during the Heartbleed timeframe, where there was a new build of Couchbase Lite that was needed, and that was pushed in like real quick time frame. And as soon as it is pushed, we're an open source company. The code will be checked into our repos, and the bits would be available on our downloads page. Sure.
I don't do mobile, but I want to eliminate some of the microservices that's going on at my company. And this mechanism of having a database locally and then syncing when things change at the delta.
Right.
Do you recommend would I use it on a backend service this mobile API, or is there something else that Couchbase has that I can use?
So I think we should talk more about this offline, and I can give you my insights into this. But I think it looks like you have a system that exists out there, and you're looking at building in the capability of making changes in some sort of a client and then pushing them back to the server.
I just want to sync the data with the Couchbase, but I
Okay.
want to use a microservice to do that.
Okay, and you can use one of the Couchbase Lite instances in that case and deploy a sync gateway out there to get equivalent functionality.
Actually, in comment to his question, I did run into somebody here who's using PouchDB against the sync gateway to do exactly that in Node.js and seemed to be having good success.
Pouch.
Pouch. Talk to her.
All right, any other questions? All cool. Thank you very much, and my apologies for starting late today. I completely got sidetracked with the keynote and didn't realize that I had folks waiting out here. Thanks again for coming, and I'm happy to talk offline with any other questions you might have.